I built an Art Deco table clock. It's mostly made out of black walnut with a little bit of beech as sort of a trim around the face. It's the plastic back on it. You can see it's kind of an Art Deco shape in that it's rounded and stair-stepped. Pretty simple design. And I'm going to go through just the different steps it took to build it. It's about 4 inches square, and you can see that the sides are just 1/2 inch pieces of walnut. The bottom is a 1/2 inch piece of walnut. All 4 sides of the center square are 1/2 inch pieces of walnut. And then it has this sort of a box coming in the back that has the face in it and the movement, so that you can slide it out if you need to, change the battery, etc. So stay tuned. The main box, or the main carcass of the saw, again, is 1/2 inch walnut. I built this little jig for cutting 45-degree angles. After carefully adjusting the blade several times to make sure you get a perfect 45, you can get really nice 45-degree cuts. Then I just use painter's tape as my hinges, so to speak, or my clamps. I put the pieces together against a straight edge and put glue on both surfaces, and then fold it up into a square to make the box, basically. I think if you put glue on both surfaces on this end grain and kind of paint it in with a glue brush, you get a good glue job that holds together very well with like woods, and again, enough glue to pretty much seal the surface. So I'm kind of careful about getting a good coverage of the glue on every single bit of that open surface. And again, as you close this up and then tape it shut, and then I check it for square and then clamp it, you get a square box that holds its shape, stays together well. You have plenty of time to deal with squeeze out, etc. And again, the tape sort of draws these corners together. And once I've got that taped up into a square, I check it for square with a square. But because you've cut all the pieces identically, you almost can't help but have a perfect square if all the corners are tight with each other. So once I've checked it for square, I will put a couple clamps on it just to apply just the slightest amount of pressure, leave that overnight, and then you've got the main box, or the main carcass of the clock, already made. Then it's a matter of just cutting rabbets or quarter rounds in the edges. And here's the diagram of the clock. The base is 3 inches by 8 7/16. Again, it's 1/2 inch thick. It's got an 1/8 inch rabbet in it. The main box is 5 inches square and 2 3/8 deep. These little end caps, the small one's 1.5 inches deep. The larger one's 1 3/4 inches deep. Again, they just have 1/8 inch rabbets cut in them. And once I'd cut those rabbets in, then I used a quarter round bit to shape them to give it a little bit more of that, I would say, Art Deco look. So that really is the simplicity of this clock. It's not as complicated as it looks, seeing it now in this kind of a view. So I cut those end caps, again, out of 1/2 inch walnut, and cut those to width and to height on the table saw. Pretty straightforward. This walnut's very clear, so it was pretty easy to work with, and got some good clean cuts. Again, with a sharp blade is obviously important. So once I'd done that, then I cut the beech pieces for that inner box and for the front trim. And you'll see that in a moment. I've shaped that trim using the dado blade and the fence with a sacrificial fence, and I was able to shape those front pieces. Here I'm just ripping some strips that I used to make those front pieces with. Once I'd rabbited those, I set them in the opening, and then I used a small saw to just cut some saw kerfs in the corners. Again, it's totally for a decoration. You could leave these pieces off completely. I was just trying this to have sort of a two-tone look, which is sort of an Art Deco thing, to have that beech set against the dark walnut. So I just used this little razor saw and cut saw kerfs in these pieces of beech just to decorate the corners with little squares. You'll see here in a second, I think after the cuts, yeah. So that's how I did that. Then the end pieces, the bottom and the two end caps, again have a 1/8 inch rabbet cut in them. And then after the rabbet, I used a round over bit to smooth them, to give them that rounded edge. Here's that little bit. It's an 1/8 inch rabbet bit. Works great. It's a 1/4 inch shaft. And here's a little 1/4 inch round over bit. Again, 1/4 inch shaft. So they work well in my router. Here's a little bit larger round over. Once I'd cut those round overs, I wanted to make them a little bit deeper. And so you can see these after the cut, again with the rabbet on the inside edge and the rounded over on the outside edge. Then they just needed some sanding and some finish to bring them all into the same color. Here's the bottom with the rabbets cut in its edges. Again, just used a small router table and drug the pieces over the top of that. As for that inner box that holds the face and the movement, I made that out of beech as well, so that when you look through the framed opening of the clock, you saw nothing but beech wood instead of the dark walnut. So again, this is just a box made out of a rabbeted piece. That rabbet holds the face of the clock, and then the glass goes between the face of this box and the face of the larger box. Hope that makes a little bit of sense. You're going to see here in a minute a diagram of that, how this clock goes together. But the idea is that the glass is sandwiched between the outer box and the inner box, and then the inner box holds the face and the movement, so it's removable if you need to either work on it, replace the movement, or replace the battery, etc. So that's how that inner box goes together. Once I built that, you needed to measure the box to cut your face and also to have the glass cut. And I mentioned in another video, you can get glass cut now at Lowe's. They cut it for free. And so I went there and had some pieces cut to fit the dimension of that outer box.
A hair.
So that it goes up against the frame. Then the inner box slides in, presses against that glass, and that's how the clock goes together. So here it is pretty much built. Haven't got the hands on it yet or the movement, but you can see how this thing goes together now by looking at this. And here's that inner box outside of the clock. Then as for faces, again, I just print my own. I just designed some faces that fit the dimension of this clock. Here's a whole bunch of other ones I was working on at the same time. And so I just cut those with an X-Acto knife to match the dimension of the face, that inner box. I simply use contact cement to glue these to a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, and that becomes my face. And then the center hole is drilled with a 5/16 bit, and then that holds both the movement and the face together, and those then slide into that inner box. There's the face material right there. And again, I just use contact cement to glue that to the face, and it works like a million. So once you've slid all those parts together, here is basically the finished clock. Again, it's just glue those end caps on and slide the inner box in from the back. Before you apply finish to this, you've got to obviously not slide that inner box into the back. I'm just showing you here the clock as far as its all of its pieces and the way it goes together. You can see how this will slide out of here like this. But before you slide that in, and before you put the glass in, you've got to finish the clock. And in this case, I used nitrocellulose lacquer. I like this Deft spray. It's a satin finish, and so I just shoot the whole clock with Deft, and it comes. You get a nice satin finish, a nice smooth finish. You do a light sanding in between coats, and you can see it nicely darkens that walnut. It adds a little bit of amber color to the beech, and I think you get a very nice finish. Again, very simple finish and nice. A few light coats of that stuff. Super light sanding in between. Shoot it again 30 minutes later. The stuff dries really fast, and you have a finished clock. And here are some pictures of this clock along with another one I shot the same day, a different shape. And yeah, these make great gifts. Super easy to build. The movements are dirt cheap. You can buy them online for as little as $6. They come with the hands. So if you print your own face, buy a $6 movement. All you have into this is a tiny bit of wood and a fair amount of labor, but you end up with a great looking, I think, a great looking clock. The sky's the limit as far as creativity of sizes and shapes and colors. And again, they make great gifts. And hope you enjoyed this video. If that's the case, please subscribe, and thank you for watching.